Good evening, everyone. At this 93rd Sunday Sahityak Satsang of iSPELL, I would like to request Dr. Preeti Chaudhary, President of iSPELL Rajasthan Forum and the event coordinator of this month.
Thank you, sir. Very good afternoon to one and all. And on behalf of iSPELL India and its Rajasthan Forum, I welcome you all to the third lecture of the series in the month of June, which is themed on eco-criticism. So for 93rd E-Sunday Sahityak Satsang, as the forum likes to call it, we have with us Dr. Sayan to talk on eco-consciousness in the literary works. I welcome you here, sir. And despite having another meeting at 7 p.m., he consented to be amongst us. So warm gratitude to you from us and a hearty welcome once again. I also welcome esteemed chair for the evening, Professor Minal Srivastavan, Head Department of English, Avdesh Pratap Singh University, Rewa, Madhya Pradesh. We welcome you, ma'am, and look forward to your kind observations on the session. Now,
thank you, Madam Chaudhary. Thank you.
Now I welcome the Master of Ceremonies for today, Mr. Salish Mishra, Assistant Professor of English, Government Chandulal Chandrakar Arts and Science College. I'm so sorry, Patan, Chhattisgarh, and has more than 50 and has more than 50 publications to his credit, both in offline and online modes. And he has attended and presented papers in more than 80 conferences. And he has a varied interest, and he's a versatile person, having interest in tourism forward.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, sir, you're audible. Perfectly audible.
Welcome, everybody, to this 93rd E-Sunday Sahityak Satsang. I'm fortunate one to welcome today's keynote speaker, Dr. Sayan sir. He's a versatile writer. He's a famous historian. He's a very famous writer too. Dr. Sayan grew up in Calcutta, and presently he is a postdoctoral fellow in WITS Center of Diversity Studies in University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. Dr. Sayan is a very promising name in the field of literature, and we are fortunate was that he is today going to enlighten us in the field of this decoloniality and eco-consciousness. Dr. Sayan has many books in his credit. Some of the books are The Indigenous Voices of Poetomachia, The Various Perspectives of Text and Performance, Different Spaces, Different Voices, Rendezvous with Decoloniality, Decolonial Existence and Urban Sensibility, a study of Mohan L. Kunchwa, History and Myth, Post-Colonial Dimensions, Myths, Histories and Decolonial Interventions of Planetary Resistance. Dr. Sayan has many fields of his interest, especially in area of research interest. He has very profound mastery on post-colonial studies, decolonial studies, critical race studies, food humanities, and critical diversity literature. Today we are very
Hello. I think Mishra sir got disconnected. Yes, poor network issue.
I think there is some technical glitch at this end. With this, I may request Dr. Sayan for his deliberation on eco-consciousness. So you may go ahead, sir. And I once again welcome you to the forum, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Priti and Dr. Mishra, for this wonderful invitation and the introduction. And I'm really very happy to be a part of this whole conversation program, which I find very interesting, because also the interesting part about I've been following the works of iSPELL India across the different parts of the country for quite some time, and I really like the easygoing conversational manner in which this is conducted. Especially, it's quite a relief because a majority of the academic spaces are so much jargonized, are so much centered on really teeth-breaking academic jargons that we really need to have spaces where we can intellectually breathe and converse freely with each other. So I really extend my heartfelt greetings to this whole iSPELL India team for conceptualizing such a fantastic space for all of us. Having said that, what I would like to do in the next 45 minutes approximately, and then obviously we can break for questions and discussions and reflections. So as already been shared, that I wish to share my perspectives today about eco-consciousness, which is obviously not a new term to us, right? Because no matter to whichever field we belong to, whether we are in the field of literature and we officially teach eco-criticism, whether we are in the field of science or in biology, or even if you are in the very non-academic spaces. For instance, some of us may be working in the corporate sector, some of us may be working in the banks or whatever, we are business. Our association with the natural environment is a kind of common thread to all of us. Obviously, in our respective capacities, there are many of us who are today here, maybe they were born and brought up in a very natural village space, so they have a different set of experience of the natural environment. Many of us who were born and brought up in the very centered city life, our interaction with the natural environment maybe is quite different with respect to having private gardens at our homes, or maybe public gardens or public parks, or similar kind of stuffs. So, but we can't deny the fact that somewhere, somewhat, we all, from different parts of time, in different capacities, we all had this scope and still have this scope of interacting with the natural environment. And what happens? What happens when we interact with the natural environment, whether we are growing vegetables or different form of grains or fruits, or we are just taking a walk in a forest land or around the rivers and the mountains? What happens? More or less, we have a very ecstatic experience in the process. We feel liberated, we feel peaceful, we feel connected, we feel loved. We have different versions and different forms of ecstatic experiences when we connect to nature in different ways. So whosoever is present here today, we all have undergone and are still undergoing in various ways these experiences of eco-consciousness, what I understand as eco-consciousness. So now the obvious question now arises that if we know all about eco-consciousness, then why exactly I kind of proposed this particular topic as a presentation for today? The reason is, I mean, there are multiple reasons. Obviously, in due course of time, as I move ahead, I will elaborate on each and every reason. But let me first outline the reasons one by one for all of us. The first thing is, we all know, irrespective of, again, as I'm saying, irrespective of professional engagements, if we are school teachers or whatever we are doing, one thing we see that we all live in a very mechanical world. Now, what do I mean by a mechanical world is a world that is centrally driven by materialistic desires. So today, one thing we see, and I'm not going into all those sort of complicated theories and philosophies. I'm just going to share stories and narratives which are very much related to our respective experiences. Now, for instance, we see that how we are judged today if we are rich, how we are judged today if we are economically well-to-do, how we are judged today that if we are intelligent. So all these parameters have a materialistic centrism in nature. For instance, it depends on the kind of the structure and the length of the space where we are staying. For instance, if you're staying in a very big house with a very big structure with all the modern electronic gadgets, it means I am rich. If you're staying, if you're kind of reading in certain particular or studying in certain particular English medium schools, which are meant for a very specific class and group of section in the society, then it means that we are educated. If we are speaking certain languages, obviously preferably foreign languages, in a certain specific way, then we are being judged that, okay, we are educated, we are intellectually sound. Now, why it has happened in this way and what has resulted into? Now, it has happened in this way because we have, obviously, especially, if we look back into the very history of colonization across the world, and specifically European colonization, when I mean by colonization, we see one thing that obviously they have uprooted our cultures, our native cultures, our traditions, our lifestyles in many ways. One more thing that also they have done is uprooting our traditional indigenous ways of learning. And it's the same story across the world, obviously in different ways, in different forms, in different capacities. But one can't deny the fact that the colonies that were under the European imperialism, were totally uprooted and shattered from every corner points. And the same thing goes for, if we look in the case of, India as well. And if you look at the history of this whole traditional education system and how this traditional indigenous education system transitioned into this so-called modern education system, what we see is this whole sort of, it's a form of a framework of violence that underlies this whole sort of transition. Violence in terms of language, violence in terms of culture, violence in terms of lifestyle, violence in terms of our body languages, everything. Personally, I'm saying, and I'm pretty sure it is quite relatable. When I studied in an English medium school, when since my childhood days, and I remember that how we were not only kind of compelled to speak in English in the school as a kind of principal parameter of studying in an English medium school, but also to speak English in a particular way, so that it kind of imitates or mimics, those typical Western parameters, the Eurocentric parameters, all the countries having their English as a first language, the way they speak, we should also try to speak. And later on, when I became a school teacher prior to coming into the university space, I also realized the same problem where the students, they are forced to speak in a particular rhythm. They're forced to pronounce the words in a particular manner. They're forced to write in a specific way. And if they're failing to do that, immediately they are discarded as unintelligent and incapable, which has been among many other problems and the major problems of this whole Eurocentric version of education system, that still we are blindly acknowledging it across diverse spaces. Now, another crucial and important aspect. So this is one aspect we should keep in question, that how this whole framework of Eurocentric capitalistic education system, where we are hardly learning anything for the sake of learning, but we are learning for the sake of producing knowledges. What happens, like, if you're in an industry, in a factory, you keep on producing goods for the sake of selling it in the market and for the sake of getting profit. The same thing is happening with the education system as well. Education institutions, mostly what we see are minting zones for certificates, are the minting zones for degrees. You pay money, you get a degree. There are many education institutions that work with this parameter. You pay money, you get a degree, you get a kind of job, and that's the end of the story. And the question is, despite learning of so many subjects, of so many theories and so many philosophies, what exactly are we contributing towards the society? You see, it's the same old story, the same form of communal violences, caste violence, racial violence, cultural violence, gender violence, sexual violence, and many other forms of violence, which are not only there for centuries, but with the passage of time, they are increasing day by day. So this very clearly, these instances very clearly shows that there has to be some problem in the ways which we are learning. No matter how much degrees we are earning, wherever we are posted, in whatever universities we are working, whatever fantastic great books we are writing, what are we giving back to the society? What exactly is happening at the social root level? And if we are intellectually so sound, if we are intellectually so capable, why we can't see a collective transformation in any part of the society? Rather, the problems that were existent 50 years back, 60 years back, many of these problems have not only decreased, but they have actually increased. On the contrary, they have increased to a vast extent. So this clearly shows that there is a lot of problem in the ways that we are getting educated. And you will see more and more as days are passing by, we are just, our education system is like a tick boxing system. You learn certain subjects, you read certain subjects just for the sake of passing a few entrance examinations, just for the sake of qualifying a few examinations through MCQs. You get into a so-called elitist privileged institution, you get a degree, you are out, you're getting a high-paid job, and that's the end of the story. Whatever the problems at the ground level remains the same. Now, in order to counter this whole problematic structure of education system that we have partly inherited from the Eurocentric colonizers, and then we have embedded it within our own system to fulfill our self-profiting needs, to just fulfill our own self-desires without really contributing towards the society, needs to be questioned, needs to be countered. Now, the question is, how do we do that? We have tried enough. You will see a lot of schools, changing curriculums, changing pedagogical patterns, changing structures, changing examination patterns, etc. And obviously, personally, we all know that any form of positive transformation cannot happen overnight. It takes several decades, several centuries to undergo the transformations. Things can go down very fast, but to move up in the positive way is always very complicated and difficult. But my question is, that are we really collectively working towards transforming the education system towards praxis, where people learn not for the sake of writing a few answer sheets and getting a few medals and degrees, but for the sake of learning, for the sake of social transformation? If we are not doing it, why we are not doing it? And if it has started, then how it has started that we can't see a collective transformation anywhere? Obviously, having said that, it doesn't mean that the educational systems across the country in India, if I just take the perspective of India, that they're not trying to make a transformation in this mechanical mindset of qualification. They are trying. And as I move ahead, I'll also cite quite a few examples that actually kind of shows that there are many educational institutions who are trying to break away from these very mechanized pattern of education and from being just a minting zone of degrees and medals, towards transforming the students towards practical knowledge, towards social transformative knowledge. There are a lot of efforts that are being made in that process. But the challenge is also, which I will point out in due course, there is a lack of collective transformation. There is a lack of collective effort. And here comes the importance, the necessity of eco-consciousness. And today, sitting in this era of this extreme situation of pandemic that we have been facing for the last couple of years, thankfully it has died down to a vast extent, but what we have experienced in 2020 and 2021, all of us across the world have once again reminded us that how this whole capitalistic system of education just crumbled into dust, especially when things just moved online rashly. How many people could really access that online education system? Even if people have accessed that online education system, how many could have benefited from out of it? We are also, all of us are very well aware of the fact that how examinations in many schools and many universities were just conducted anyhow, without following or without respecting the basic parameters of ethics and morality. So we know, I mean, this capitalistic education system is like a patchwork. It's a patchwork solution. When I mean, it's a very common sight in West Bengal. I mean, in other parts of India as well, that you will have roads with potholes, and you keep on complaining. No one is there to listen. But just prior to the election, when the election comes, just to make sure that they have a strong vote bank, immediately you will start, people started working, putting in, filling up the potholes, covering it up. Election is gone. After 5 or 6 months, again, the potholes are back. So this is the patchwork solution, a temporary patchwork solution that we also see in other sectors as well. And it's the same for education system as well. There are many schools, again, I talk from the experience of working in schools. When they wanted to modernize the school, the very concept of modernization is to build a lab, to introduce a few smart boards in your classroom, to introduce a few gadgets, and then you start advertising them across newspapers, and that is how you keep on attracting students, and that is how it ends up in modernization. But the root problems in terms of curriculum structure, in terms of pedagogical structure, in terms of the inclusivity of the students, all remain same. So we use these masks to hide the real practical problems. That is what is happening in case of our education, and has been happening for several centuries now. I mean, prior to India's independence, that was already there. And obviously in the post-independent era, after 1947, things have only aggravated towards worse. So here comes the necessity of eco-consciousness, where from this very capitalocentric education system, we have to make a shift towards eco-centric education system, where we are moving, where we are shifting from this all sorts of materialistic centered education system, where we are only learning for the sake of earning, learning for the sake of degree, which is obviously a necessity. I don't deny that. We all need money for the sake of survival. But that shouldn't be the ultimate goal of our learning process. And the narratives that I'm going to share with you about the eco-centric education system is also part of my experience when I worked in Bhutan for approximately for 2 years, from 2019 to 2021. And I don't know if you are aware, the Bhutanese education system have a very interesting policy. It's called the Green School System. And the Green School System now, even in many parts of India in segments, for instance, in Delhi, in Kanpur, in Lucknow, I know these 3 places, and there are, I think, a few places as well, I think in Bangalore as well, where in some of the schools, they're experimenting that how a green school education system, the model that Bhutan has been following since 2006, can also be implemented in our country. Now, what is the green school education system? Let me briefly share a history of it. so that you are more able to understand the context of it with respect to our thoughts. So the thing is, in 2006, when Bhutan actually initiated its first democratic government, they say that every country has the tendency of measuring the success of the country in terms of the GDP and the GNP, gross domestic product, and the gross national product. Bhutan said, no, we are not going to do that. What we are going to do is, we are going to measure the development and the progress of a country in terms of GDH and GNH, gross domestic happiness and gross national happiness. Now, obviously, that has to be put into practice, right? We just can't, make a theory and put into practice. How to put that into practice? Among several policies, one of the policies was the first education minister of Democratic Bhutan, Dr. Thakur Singh Paurial. He said, along with his committee members, they all came to the conclusion that let us introduce a green school system. Now, those who have already gone to Bhutan, you must have, or at least have gone through the pictures, you must have seen that the country is entirely covered by forest. And it's a rule of the government that 62% of the country needs to be covered by forest. Earlier, it was more strict, it was 70%. Then people started appealing that, if so much of the country is covered with forest, we can't establish our own business, our own spaces. So then it was reduced to 62%. So 62% of the country has to be covered with forest. And they have already historically, traditionally, the Bhutanese communities, they have a very eco-centric way of existence. Their existence, their understanding is centered on the natural environment. Whether you talk about science, you talk about spiritualism, you talk about literature, whatever perspectives you take into account, everything is centered on natural environment. They say that learning from other countries in the world, that we shouldn't be rash with the environment. We should not exploit the natural environment. Let us generate a form of governing setup which is centered on the natural environment. And that gave birth to the green school system. Now, there are various parameters of green school system, just to share a few parameters with all of you. So one of the parameters of green school system is that, every school there in Bhutan need to have their own infrastructure of dairy farming and agricultural field. Every school will have its own agricultural field. Every school will have its own dairy farming space. And who will do that? Who will maintain them? The students and the teachers will work together to build them, to develop them, to maintain them. So now you see the students, they're learning about different things in their books. They're learning about literature, they're learning about the growth of plants, they're learning about physics, chemistry, biology. On the one side, they are learning these through their textbooks, they are doing it in their respective science labs, but also on the other side, they're coming out right into the field and they're learning how to grow plants, how to sow seeds, how to do dairy farming, how to maintain the quality of the soil. And this is how they're not just learning science in a text-centric way, but parallelly, they're also learning science, geography, biology, literature in a very, very practical way with the first-hand experiences. And this rule is still now is what is being followed across every school in Bhutan. There is another interesting aspect. Now, for example, if you want to buy a land, if to construct a house in Bhutan, the central rule is a minimum portion of the land in your house needs to be spared for some kind of vegetable cultivation. You can't use the entire land for the sake of construction of your house. Anything, you might be growing some spinach there, you might be sowing some potatoes there, you might be growing some rice or paddy or whatever, corns there, but something has to grow. You see, these were some of the rules and regulations that has been established. And in the long run, what you can see, the great impact is, and I realized that because when the full-fledged outbreak of COVID-19 took place across the world, at that time in 2020, I was based in Bhutan. Obviously, lockdown measures were implemented. We were staying in the university, in the college campus. All the college campus gates were locked. You won't believe, we never, for a single day, we never had a crisis with anything, whether for food, whether for water, whether for vegetables, because inside our college campus, we had our own greenhouse where we grew vegetables. And the greenhouse, amongst many other things, was a part of the project that the students in the eco-criticism module did. They had a project work. So instead of just writing a few assignments and submitting and getting a few grades, what they did is 4 groups were divided. One of them constructed, eco-friendly dustbins, compost zones, where you can throw away the waste and compose it naturally for the fertility of the soil. One of the groups constructed an eco-friendly garden. One of the groups constructed a greenhouse there. And they started sowing vegetables, different forms of vegetables were put in there. And apart from that, we were staying in a complete village, a rural area. Every house around the village, every house were so self-sufficient in terms of foods and other basic resources that we never in Bhutan faced this problem of hoarding of goods that we saw all across the world, including India, where everyday newspapers are coming that people with a lot of money, they are going into this, shops and they're just hoarding, they're madly and crazily hoarding every goods. And those people who need them, they are without those goods. We never had this issue ever in Bhutan. Despite the fact that we were not staying right in the center of the city or sort of stuff, we were totally standing alone in a village area, the place we were staying. We never ever had this issue with anybody. The second thing, to deal and to center nature as the way of educating us is, nature always teaches us the value of sharing and caring. Again, let me say a very fantastic example, with respect to this whole sort of, again, with respect to my experience in Bhutan. So, apart from the things that we actually got from the villages and what we grew in our campus, we also needed a few things which were delivered by the trucks. The trucks used to come. Now, obviously, what happened, for instance, we also had students, students, faculties all were there in the campus. For example, we all gathered near the truck. Now, for instance, by the time I reached there, I needed pumpkin, for instance. Let me take an example. And by the time I reached there, I saw that the pumpkin has been sold off by the people, by the truck driver, to the 5 students or 2 other faculties. You will never see that once they get their purchase, they will go into the room and lock it up. They will stand there. Why they would stand there? They would see it, every people is getting everything. Now, there could be somebody who might not have got sufficient vegetable to survive. They will stand there, they will distribute amongst each other. Now, you see, these values have not been cultivated or inculcated just overnight or over time. They have done this. That is how they grew up. And when I started, for a kind of project that I was doing with, it's titled Green Academia, when I was doing this project, I had these conversations as a part of my project. They said that is how they grew up. In the villages, that is what they learned from their grandparents, from their great-grandparents, from their parents. That is how they have seen their parents also behave and engage with people. Caring and sharing is a very central element as a part of their experience. And then, again, let me share to further, develop my argument that how the natural environment can teach us a lot without a textbook. I remember when I first, went there, the weather is very different from, what I'm habituated back in my city of Kolkata. So the weather would be, it's cold, but at the same time, at times it's very humid. So I had some kind of fungal infection in my feet. And, in the mountains, you don't see things are available at your hands. You just can't walk out and see a medical shop. You just can't walk out and go to a doctor. If I have to go to a doctor, I have to travel by 30 minutes, at least minimum. Now, I was sharing with one of my colleagues there. I had this problem. I don't know. At that time, I was new there. Where should I go for a doctor, etc. He said that, wait, just hold on. So in a lunch break inside the campus, and the campus was right in the mountains. It was like with wild plants and trees and all around and forest. It was beautiful. It was not that such a mechanically structured campus with multiple buildings. It was very naturally structured. So he just walked me in the lunchtime. He just took me around, and there was some kind of wild plants. He picked those wild plants and told me that, remember, this is the area where you find these wild plants. Every day, twice a day, soak these wild plants in warm water and put your feet there. In 7 days, you will get cured. And that's what happened with me. So you see, for this, now from where did they learn these basic science, these basic medicines? They didn't mug it up through their textbooks. They didn't learn it through degrees. They have learned it, they have imbibed these indigenous values, knowledge systems from their parents, from their grandparents, from the community members. Now, my purpose of saying this is obviously not to discard this whole sort of education system. No, we obviously need textbooks, we need degrees for various practical reasons, but it is the purpose of sharing this is a form of invitation to all of us that to kind of create and generate a balance between this indigenous education system and modern education system. Obviously, we need technologies. Technologies are very important as a part of the contemporary education system, but let's not generate a technocracy. That's what we are doing. Let's not generate and center everything around technology. And we can already see the disastrous consequences in various parameters in various ways. The form of exclusivities, the form of psychological abuses, the form of violence that they are generating, this technocratic outlook towards life is generating within us. These people, this is how, in Bhutan, we have seen this education system. I have personally seen this education system works. And there are ample of examples across the world as well. For example, in Kenya, those who are familiar with the name of a very, very reputed environmental activist, Wangari Maathai. Now, Wangari Maathai, I think it was back in 1988 that she generated the Green Belt movement. Now, this Green Belt movement also created a massive impact across different parts of Africa. So, the Maasai community of Kenya, their lands were being forcefully taken away by the government for the sake of construction of factories, industries, pipelines, sewerages, etc. So their whole indigenous community were being disrupted by these modernist invasions. So Wangari Maathai, along with several activists from the neighborhood villages in Kenya where she lived, they gathered together to prevent this. And we have ample examples in India as well. The Save the Tree movement in Jharkhand we had in Odisha as well. The kind of resistance that have been created by the Kond community, the Bonda communities, and various other indigenous communities across the country. Initiatives are also being taken in India as well, just to share with all of us. If I give you some very interesting examples, for instance, there is this organization called the Saran School in Kerala, in the Attapadi district in Kerala. Now, if you just type Saran School, you can actually read through how they function. One of the major parameters of Saran School, to get admitted in Saran School, is not to get a degree. Saran School is not going to issue a degree. Saran School basically teaches, and you can be a student at any age. You don't have to be a kid. You can be an old man, you can be an old woman. If you have urge to learn practically, go to Saran School. And they organize workshops and think tanks, and you can be a residency there for 1 month, 2 months. You stay there, you learn about the ways. What they do, they teach the students of Saran School, for instance, how to make colors. For instance, if you need colors for the sake of painting, how to make colors from the natural environment, how to create to increase the fertility of the soil, how to generate the fertility of the soil, not with chemicals, but with compost leaves, with the wastage elements of the natural environment, how to utilize the waste elements of the natural environment for the sake of enhancing the quality of the soil. If, for instance, the students want to perform a drama, they don't have a stage, they don't have an artificial stage. They use a space of the natural field as a stage, and how to use the trees and the plants and the different other things as the props of the stage. They don't have any air conditioner or cooler inside their campus. Everything is natural. The houses are built with such woods and such elements that even in the extreme summer season, they're naturally cool. They don't have refrigerator. They use the traditional system of preserving the food against heat and spoiling. These are necessary. And many of you must be thinking, then if the degrees are not issued, then how people after Sarang school, after completing the timeline, if Sarang school, what do we do next? How do we get a job? There are people from Sarang school who are getting jobs as, who are becoming entrepreneurs. They're establishing their own entrepreneurial spaces in terms of business, as terms of hoteliers, in terms of constructing schools in their respective spaces to further the knowledge and education. So there are scopes. Obviously, they come with multiple challenges. When I say this, I also don't deny the fact they come with multiple challenges, as we have ample of challenge with this modernist education system as well. But the purpose of sharing, and with which I would like to conclude prior to moving into the questions and discussions, the purpose of sharing this whole narrative, this whole story, is that we have imbibed, we have gained a lot of knowledge, values about the natural environment from our foremothers, our forefathers, our parents, our grandparents. Let's not totally ignore and forget those aspects of knowledge systems. Let us, I'm obviously not going to call to strike a balance, because I find this term is very problematic, but let us kind of generate an amalgamated interwoven space where on the one side, we inherit and imbibe and practice this various knowledge systems, the environmental knowledge systems across the world. And on the other side, we also utilize various dynamics of the modern knowledge system and create a blended form of learning. And that blended form of learning has to start right from our respective homes. Because even before we go to the schools in these four-walled institutions, we learn from our parents, our relatives, our surroundings. Let's kind of ingrain this mindset within every one of us from our respective childhood days, so that when we grow as compassionate beings. We know how to naturally love each other. We know how to respect each other. And most importantly, we know how to honestly care and share with each other. Obviously, there could be many other examples as well, but I think I'll stop here, and we can have questions, we can have reflections, you can share your thoughts, perspectives, and whatever you want. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sayan sir. You have really enriched our knowledge on this particular topic. You have given very enriching illustrations for understanding this topic to all of us. Thank you. You have very effectively talked on contributing to the society. What should we do to the society being in the field of educational sector? You have talked on learning ways. You have talked on eco-centric schooling system, education system. You have talked on different illustrations of different countries. Those are very educative ones to make us more good doing in the field of school system, college system. Now, I request all the persons who are attending this session for their queries and their questions. This session is open to all. If you have any query, any question that our Dr. Sayan sir can answer well, you're all welcome for putting forward your questions. I request all who are attending this very educative one, the educational based session. If you have any query on eco consciousness or any other related areas of this particular topic, you can offer your question. Is there any question, any query?
Before anyone asks, I guess they are taking some time, so I'll like to interrupt and would try to sneak in. Dr. Dea, I just had a simple query. While designing the curriculum for literature students, so what would you suggest to keep in mind adopting this approach towards ecocentric education system?
Yeah, thank you so much for this question, Dr. Priti. So the thing is, first of all, when we are designing the literature curriculum in our respective universities, wherever we are based in, the first thing that we should keep in mind that the kind of student group that we have as students. I mean, obviously, we need to know on the one side about the various dynamics of global literatures as well, which is very important. But at the same time, it is also necessary for us to generate a kind of consciousness about the local literature as well. The very local literature that is based in that particular place, which I find personally is still very much absent. Having understood the fact that we are having a lot of transformation in terms of folk literatures, Indian literature in translation, Dalit literature, many things are coming up in that process, but still there is a way of ignorance for local literature, and still somewhat we are still very much bended towards this whole Eurocentric literary space. So the first is local literature. Now, when you go into the local literature, if you're looking into the literature that is based in a particular area of Rajasthan, you will see that local literature widely develops from experiences with respect to the natural environment. I mean, obviously, there are various other factors, but natural environment, experiences with and within the natural environment play a very crucial role in terms of the development of the local literary spaces. Now, also the second thing is, when we read local literatures, we might come across various spaces that talk about certain aspect of the natural environment. And then, we have this culture of organizing educational tours. Now, what we do in educational tours, like instead of just going around and then coming back and submitting a report, let us have a presentation in terms of that, what we have learned from that space. Let us conduct those educational tours towards that are centered in the natural environment. Obviously, there are various practical concerns. There is a monetary concern. There is an infrastructural concern. Having said that, we all have this capability, or we at least try to find out that we should kind of conduct educational tours to spaces which are centered in the natural environment. For example, there could be an agricultural institution where we go. Now, one of the members from the agricultural institution can come up and talk about the different dynamics of agricultural growth and the practicalities of it. And when the students go back to the literature, now people might say, well, this is something which sounds very associated with science. Well, this might sound something which is very associated with the, if somebody is talking about agriculture. What about literature? Well, that is the point. We need to break away from these frameworks. We need to break away from these prisons, these disciplinary prisons. Because when we are reading literature, we are not just reading grammar, we are not just reading rhetorics, we are not just writing short notes and character sketches. We are also reading science, we are also reading technology, we are also reading sociology, and various disciplinary dynamics comes into the foreplay in that process. So it's necessary that we should engage the students. And also there is this very problematic construct about literature, especially when one goes into PhD, that there cannot be any field work in literature. No, there can be a lot of field work in literature. There can be. The field work doesn't have to be necessarily something which is very literature centric, but that can feed into the work of literature. So it is necessary that when we engage with this whole sort of curricular designing in case of literature, we also provoke and poke the students to think from other disciplinary dimensions as well. And which can be done in terms of organizing education tours, which can be done in organizing, visiting tours, which can be done in terms of the assignment structures as well, where we doesn't ask the student to write a short note on a particular essay, but rather we ask the students to look at the natural environment and project, for instance, look at the natural environment, project your thoughts about the interpretation of the natural environment with respect to your life. So where, that gives them a creative space, that gives them a kind of, that opens a window for multi-directional thinking. And also it's practically feasible and it's impactful as well, where they are able to understand a particular subject from multiple forms of dimensions, rather than not just saying that I am an English literature student, so I have read this poetry and drama and texts and whatever.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have a query. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sir, can you instruct us about differences between eco-awareness and eco-consciousness?
Well, yes, I mean, that's a very interesting question. And it's interesting because there are a lot of overlaps between these two concepts of eco-awareness and eco-consciousness. Now, the thing is, the way I understand, eco-consciousness actually feeds into eco-awareness and vice versa. For instance, like from the very, it is first eco-consciousness, then it leads to eco-awareness for me. Because the consciousness is something what gets embedded in my mindset. If from the very childhood days, I am taught that never hit a stone to a dog, never or any other domestic animals, for instance, never go to a tree and pluck its flower, never tear a leaf. If I am embedded with these values, gradually what happens, this eco-consciousness, with the passage of time, I develop a form of eco-consciousness that natural environment is not for the sake of violence, but natural environment should be respected, not exploited. And that leads to a form of a very genuine form of eco-awareness. But if from the childhood days, I am entertained that I should pelt stones at domestic animals or any other animals, I should, destroy the nature, I can tear leaves from the trees, I can, exploit fruits, I can cut down trees and harm the plants. Even when I grow, I might have a form of eco-awareness, but which is very problematic and incomplete. Maybe I will read a few books, maybe I'll listen to a few lectures, maybe I would be a part of a few discussions, and maybe I can feel that, maybe for a certain period of time that, okay, I should be lovable and respectful towards nature, but that may not have a very long-term impact because my consciousness is already embedded that nature is for the sake of violence. So rather than really differentiating it categorically, for me it's eco-consciousness that leads towards eco-awareness.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, there is a request that is put forward by Priyanka Sharma ma'am. Please suggest some books on relationship between environment and culture and on religion of Kenya and Africa.
Yes, sure. Let me do one thing. While I also tell the name, let me also type it down, which is one book that I'm right now typing is called The Green School, and I'm sharing it with everyone. It's by the Green School that I was talking about is by Thakur Singh Porial, which is actually the very whole system of Green School and how practically it can be implemented towards in different contexts for the sake of practically using Green School system for the sake of gaining knowledge is important. And to be honest, in India, the Green School has already been translated into Hindi and Urdu. The Urdu version was released a few days back in Delhi. The Hindi version was released last year in Lucknow or Kanpur, probably. And It's also being translated in various languages across the world. And many schools are now thinking of how to use this model, obviously in a customized, locally relevant version to be used in different schools. So this is one school. This is one work that you can look into. It's a 60-page book. Another is, I would immediately, that is coming in my mind is if you just look at the work, Green Belt Movement by Wangari Maathai. This Green Belt Movement is again another fantastic work. If you go into the website, it's not exactly a book, but if you can go into the website, you will see a lot of narratives and stories and different perspectives that actually comes up with respect to nature. Another work that I would like to talk about is, it's called Thoughts on Ubuntu. Ubuntu is another very interesting philosophy that has emerged in different parts of Africa, and it's by Professor Mugobe Ramose. I am also writing the names as I'm saying. Thoughts on Ubuntu is another fantastic work that you can look in terms of Africa. If you want some dimensions about, if you want some dimensions with respect to Latin America, they have this culture called the Sumak Causeway. Okay, you can read about this particular as well. Maybe I'm wrong with the spelling. Please forgive me for that. But something is called the Sumak Causeway, which is based in Latin America, and they have this similar kind of notion. Especially the various Mexican and the Chilean, the Andean indigenous communities, that nature is their god, and whatever development that they do, not by harming nature, but in sync with the natural environment. Sumak Causeway is another perspective that you can look into to get a kind of understanding.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other query or question? Okay, thank you, sir. Thanks for your wonderful deliverance. Thanks for your wonderful focusing on the topic. We are really enriched ones. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again for this effective, educative session during this particular wonderful experience. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Now it is the time when we are going to welcome today's chairperson, Dr. Minal Srivastavan. She is professor and head of the Department of English of Avdesh Pratap Singh University, Rima. Madam has more than 30 years of experience of teaching. Ma'am has done her PhD on moral vision in the novels of A.J. Cronin. Ma'am's guru was Dr. Madhu Malti Adhikari ma'am. She was wonderful professor. Ma'am has many papers published. Ma'am has coordinated one national seminar. She has attended many national and international conferences. Her papers were presented in those events. Ma'am had presented in 2008 a wonderful research paper in Aberdeen University, Scotland. Ma'am's area of interest are Indian English writing, women studies, and British fiction. More than now, 15 scholars of ma'am have been awarded with PhD degree. Ma'am has been in different expert committees as expert. She has been in different DRCs and RDC committee in Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh. Ma'am has been member in Higher Education Commission for selection of different professors. Ma'am has many administrative positions in her university. Ma'am has been executive counselor. Ma'am has been dean faculty of arts, and presently Dr. Minal ma'am is the chairperson of Board of Studies of English in APS University, Riva. So now we are going to be blessed with the words of our respected Dr. Minal Srivastavan ma'am. She will bless us with her own views on the given topic. We will also talk on the deliverance of our respected Sir. I cordially invite respected Dr. Minal Srivastavan ma'am here. Ma'am, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mishra, for these wonderful words, kind, generous words. Thank you so much. A warm good evening to everyone present here. I thank Dr. Preeti Chaudhary for having given me this opportunity of presiding over this wonderful lecture delivered by Dr. Sayan Day. Dr. Day, I am, presently surprised because your lecture has really come as an eye-opener for everyone who has been listening to his lecture would agree with me, because when I saw the topic, eco-consciousness, a literary venture, I somehow thought that you will be speaking about a lot of theories and about a lot of, the work that has been done and what needs to be done. Your practical approach to this lecture really took me, surprised me pleasantly, and I'm very happy that you have delivered your lecture in this way. You have given so many practical examples, and you have done a great job really by citing examples from your own life, from citing examples from different parts of the world where such beautiful and such priceless work is going on as far as protecting the environment, as far as protecting nature is concerned. I would like to begin with the fact that nature has always been a part and parcel of literature. Literary discourses throughout the ages, they have spoken about nature, they have celebrated nature, they have worshipped nature. You have writers, Kalidas and Shakespeare, Milton, the Romantics, Thomas Hardy, R.K. Narayan, Amitabh Ghosh. There is a series of writers who have been speaking of nature in one way or the other. They have been celebrating nature. They have been speaking of nature. You have the beautiful poem by Robert Frost, where he speaks about stopping in the woods. Because he has promises to keep, he cannot afford to stop in the woods anymore. The beautiful lines translated in Hindi also, Sagan Suhavne aur Shyamavan, Kintu Adhura hai mera pran, Koso dur abhi hai manzil, abhi akalpit sone ka kshan. Beautiful lines by Robert Frost. You have a spate of writers, you have a plethora of writers who have written beautifully about nature. You have spoken about the beauty of nature. And I would like to draw attention towards this poem by W.H. Davis, which he wrote in 1911. That is almost more than 100 years ago. The poem is Leisure, and it is a beautiful poem. What is this life if full of care? We have no time to stand and stare, no time to stand beneath the boughs and stare as long as sheep and cows. No time to see when woods we pass, where squirrels hide their nuts in grass. No time to see in broad daylight, streams full of stars like skies at night. No time to turn at beauty's glance and watch your feet, how they can dance. No time to wait till her mouth can enrich that smile her eyes began. A poor life this is, if full of care, we have no time to stand and stare. The question is now, stare at what? With so much deforestation going on, with so many concrete jungles coming up everywhere. My own city where I reside, Riva, it's not a very big city. It's a large town. It's a small city, it's a large town, I can say. But this, the kind of construction that is going on here, the kind of deforestation and the felling of trees that is going on over here, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Attention needs to be given. We have heard of the poem Tree by Tina Morris, where she says, they did not tell us what it would be like without trees. Nobody imagined that the whispering of leaves would grow silent, or the vibrant jade of spring pale to gray death. And now we pile rubbish on rubbish in the dusty landscape, struggling to create a tree. But though the shape is right and the nailed branches lean upon the wind and plastic leaves lend color to the twigs, we wait in vain for the slow unfurling of buds, and no amount of loving can stir our weary tree to sting it. At least we, students of literature, scholars of literature, we must become eco-conscious. Beautifully delineated difference between eco-consciousness and eco-awareness by you, Dr. Day. I thank you for that. It was the differentiation, the way you differentiated the two. It was really beautiful. And all of us must really become eco-conscious so as to, preserve what we had got the nature and its bounties, unless and until we are aware, unless and until we ourselves think of protecting the environment, the destruction would continue, would go on. And you have spoken of a number of things, Dr. Dev. You spoke about the mechanical world that presently, we live in, and how the materialistic possessions, how they decide one's worth, how the kind of education and the kind of schools that we have gone to, how they decide, what we are, where we are, or what stage we are in, and the language that we use, how that becomes a symbol, or how that becomes a parameter for judging our worth. You are absolutely right in this. And you have spoken about from how Eurocentric we must become ecocentric as far as our education is concerned. The concept of green school, green education system, green school education system that you gave, and you spoke about GDP and GNP and GNP and GNH, GDP and GDH and GNP and GNH. The way you spoke about the parameter that should be actually there is the parameter of happiness that should be measured, in fact, for measuring the success of a person. So you have spoken about a number of things. You have spoken about how from school education itself we may start making our children eco-conscious. Of course, we have our own people here, Sundar Lal Bahuguna and Vandana Shiva, and people like Medha Patkar and people like Arundhati Roy even, who have stood up stood up for the protection of natural resources. We have people doing this, but then this needs to be done by each and every one of us. There need not be just a person, just a community, just a group, just a forum, who want to do something for the nature. No, every house must do it. Every family must do it. Every child must learn how to preserve our environment, how to protect our environment. And that is the call of the hour. That is the urgent need of the hour. That was beautiful what Dr. Day mentioned. He mentioned the way, he mentioned how when land is to be purchased in Bhutan for construction, at least some portion of the land, you must, with the people who purchase land, they must use that portion of land for cultivating something, for cultivating some kind of vegetation. And how, farming and even dairy things, they are all taught to children in the school education. Now, they somehow had got lost. If we go back to the ancient system of education, you will see many of those things happening there. I'm sorry. You will see many of these things happening in our ancient system of education. But now, it only happens, and wherever it is happening, wherever schools are imparting this kind of education, besides the normal formal way of teaching, wherever the school is doing it is only a handful of schools maybe that do that. It is only a few schools maybe who pay attention to this. Whereas, given today's condition, every school syllabus, every school curriculum must have some kind of practical training as far as protecting our environment is concerned. That is so very important. That is so very important. Children must be taught. And even if the schools do not teach, as parents, as elders, we may teach our children. We may start practicing this so that the children, they simply follow. Because children will follow what you do. Once we start doing it, the children will start doing it on their own. They may, by word of mouth, the things might reach the school and they might start doing that there as well. So this is something that must be consciously done by everyone. This is the need of the hour. This is the calling of the hour. Thank you, Dr. Day, for pointing this out. And thank you for making us really conscious about, for making us eco-conscious and eco-aware. You delivered a beautiful lecture. And on behalf of every person who was listening to your lecture, I thank you. And I thank Dr. Mishra, I thank Dr. Chaudhary for inviting me here, for expressing my views. Thank you so much. That's all from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your judicious words. You have beautifully summed up the deliverance of Dr. Sayan, sir. Ma'am, you have really focused on all the main points that Dr. Sayan has shared with us. Thank you, ma'am, for your very much informative summing deliverance on the topic that Mr. Sayan has dealt with. Thank you, ma'am. Now it is the time I would like to invite Dr. Ashok Sachdeva, sir, Vice President of iSPELL, for the presentation of certificates. Respected Dr. Ashok Sachdeva, sir.
Hello, Dr. Ashok, sir.
I request Dr. Sachdeva, sir.
Yes, sir. Are you addressing me, sir? Hello?
Sir.
Yeah,
sir,
I'm sorry. I couldn't hear it at that time. I'm sorry.
Sir, you are welcome, sir. You are welcome for the presentation of certificate, sir.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. Definitely. I must congratulate the main speaker on his wonderful deliverance of the lecture. It was really insightful, eye-opening, and revealing. And there were many aspects which I was listening to. There were subtle, finer nuances and differences that he brought out. Equally was enlightening the remarks of the chairperson, Dr. Minal Srivastavan. So here we are to give away the certificates, facilitate to elevate. So the first certificate goes to the Dr. Sayan, who is postdoctoral fellow at WITS Center for Diversity Studies, University of Witwatersrand, Johannesburg, for delivering the expertise as keynote speaker in the 93rd East Sunday Sahitik Satsang on eco-consciousness, a literary venture, today on 19 June 2022. So we are very beholden, thankful to you, Dr. Sayan, for your wonderful, and we are very pleased, honored, and really feel great pride in giving this certificate to you, sir. I hope I'm audible.
Sir, yes, you are welcome,
Yes.
sir. You are audible, sir.
Yes, sir. So this evening was phenomenal in the sense that we had the opportunity to listen to Dr. Sayan. And this certificate of appreciation goes to Dr. Minal Srivastavan, Professor and Head, Department of English, Avdesh Pratap Singh University, Rewa, for chairing the 1903rd E-Sunday Sahitik Satsang on eco-consciousness, a literary venture on 19 June today, 2022. Dr. Srivastav, you have been very eloquent. You have really got the gift of the gab. I was mesmerized by the way you were just summarizing the things and reflecting remarks and the kind of fluency and that you were able to reflect upon the whole topic. So, Dr. Minal Srivastav, kindly accept this certificate, and we really feel honored to give this to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sachdeva. It's nice listening to your voice after such a long time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, really. We haven't met for a long time, but I do remember and really cherish those memories when we met on a couple of times. And yes.
Same here. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Minal. And then this certificate of appreciation goes to Mr. Shailesh Mishra, Assistant Professor of English, Government, Chandulal Chandrakar Arts and Science College, Patan, Durg, Chhattisgarh, for being the Master of Ceremonies in this 93rd E-Sunday Sahityik Satsang on eco-consciousness. Congratulations to you, Mr. Shailesh Mishra, for wonderfully playing the role of Master of Ceremony today. Heartiest congratulations, and please do accept this certificate on behalf of iSPELL India.
Thank you, sir. Thanks to iSPELL India.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for giving this opportunity, because it came to me as a surprise. I wasn't prepared for it, but I heard once or twice in a very low volume my name being announced. So thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Ghanshyam.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Ma'am, may we proceed on, ma'am? Ma'am, for extending vote of thanks.
I think we have Ghanshyam sir to say something about the lecture, and he was congratulating Dr. Day in the chat box. So we would like to invite Ghanshyam sir. just a second. We have children at home, so please don't mind it. Yes, so we would like to invite Ghanshyam sir to share a few words of his.
Dr. Preeti, it was not needed, because I have already messaged it, because after the chairperson's remark, it's really difficult to speak, because when the stalwarts speak like that, then you don't have even words to speak. So already we have reached the peak of the session with the speech and the speaking of these stalwarts. And Dr. Sayan, listening to him is like the music which flows, the water which flows, the wind which blows. So everywhere it's a kind of a music which is coming in the form of nature. And he is the one who hasn't taken us into the four walls to study nature, but he has taken out in the form of sarang to understand the rang of nature. So sarang is basically the rang of nature. You cannot have the beautiful colors of nature within the four walls of the classrooms. So that's why the sarang in Palakkad district has been created by two of the teachers, those who have left their job, and they started grooming their own child as the first student of their school. So that was really wonderful. And as far as Bhutan is concerned, the happiness quotient, which we never talk of. We always talk of the intelligent quotient, the emotional quotient, the psychological quotient, the spiritual quotient, and the social quotient. But we never talk of happiness quotient. And the happiness quotient which is there in Bhutan has given immense recognition to Bhutan. And that's what education is all about. Education is not what we are doing. Education is to educate the nation towards nature, to get into nature, to understand nature, to smell nature, to inhale nature. Every aspect of nature in a natural way has been dealt by Dr. Sayan. So indeed, it's a great moment to listen to Sayan. I think Dr. Sayan is on this platform for the second time on iSPELL. And it's really nice to have a postdoctoral fellow. And after his postdoctorate, once again, we will be having him on the platform of iSPELL. And indeed, it's a pleasure to listen to Dr. Minal also, who has spoken about nature and various poems she has narrated as far as nature is concerned. And it's really nice what Dr. Sayan has said, to bring all the academicians on a particular platform and to listen to them without borders and boundaries, and to move beyond that. That's what iSPELL is doing. And thank you very much to each and everyone, those who have joined us on the platform of iSPELL, to make this as a satsang rather than a kind of a teaching, because learning is nothing but earning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ghanshyam. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Now we are going towards the summing up session of this particular session. I would like to extend my vote of thanks to respected Dr. Sayan Day, sir, towards Dr. Minal Srivastavan, ma'am. I thank Dr. Preeti Chaudhary, ma'am. I thank Dr. Ashok Sachdeva, sir. I thank Dr. J. Ghanshyam, sir, for his blessings. And I thank all who are here with us to attend this session. And really, it was an experience that we cannot forget in the life. And we will be really going on with all the gleanings that we have today. so for this eco consciousness is concerned, and it would be really making us achieving our goals in a very effective way. Thank you to all who are the part of this particular 93rd Sunday Sahityak Satsang. Thank you to all for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Shailesh sir, and my best wishes to Dr. Day for his next talk. And that's how we wind this session up. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am,
Thank
for
you
giving
so
me
much.
this chance. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, everybody, for having me in this space. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.